Hello, everyone. This is Barb Bruce, and I want to welcome you to this week's episode of the Better Together Facebook Live. I am so glad that you're with me tonight. This is a special night. Actually, something super fun is going to happen this evening. If this is your first time watching Better Together, I am so glad that you are here with us. This is a show where we talk about our hopes, our dreams, our worries, and at times it's the Christmas season, even our waistlines. And it doesn't matter where you come from or what you've been through. Here at the Better Together Facebook Live show is where we talk about the things that make us better together, the hope, the help, and the practical next steps that we need. If you have been a part of the show, you know that audience participation, audience engagement is big. So please jump in and say hello. I would love to just hear from you. Just type hello and put up the comment. You know that we love to show the comments on screen when we can. And as I mentioned to you tonight, we have a special show because one of my passions in ministry, as well as one of my passions just in all of the years that I've been a leader, is creating opportunities for younger leaders. And tonight, that's going to happen. I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. I wanted to do a quick mention because it is the Christmas shopping season, and I don't know exactly where you're at. If you are an early holiday shopper, a late shopper, if you're an early shopper, give me a shout out. If you're a late shopper, give me a shout out. But you might be trying to figure out stocking stuffers. Like, how do you fill up that space in a stocking and to fill it well? Well, I have an idea for you, a perfectly sized stocking stuffer, and it is right here. This is my new devotional. It's Surrendered 40 Devotions to Help You Let Go and Live Like Jesus. I call this my spiritual cup of coffee. My fabulous producer, Tabitha, is back there. Tabitha, you can pop up the picture. The Surrendered Devotional is 40 devotions of letting go topics. Letting go of fear, letting go of anxiety, letting go of others, letting go of toxic relationships. If you have things in your life that you've been holding on to and you need to let go of, but you need something that will help, that you can hold on to Jesus, help you do that, the devotional will help you do that. And you can buy it for friends who are struggling with fear, anxiety, worry, problems in their lives. And these fit right into stockings so well. So you can find the Surrender Devotional anywhere you love to buy books, or Tabitha will put a link in the comments. And speaking of comments, I see a number of you have jumped in already. So Tabitha, who do we have with us this evening? Oh, friends! I'm so happy that you guys jumped in and said hello. Who is saying hi this evening? Hi, Melinda. Melinda, did you get the book that I sent to you? Let me know if you did. And I see Alicia. Alicia, she said, happy Tuesday to me. My week is off to a really good start. I'm so glad that you're here. And Christine McManus, she said for her Christmas shopping, everything is done early and wrapped. Honey, you are a rock star. Now, last week I visited Christine's group, and Christina, I'm trying to remember, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She's in Pennsylvania. I had a chance to visit with her. Her daughter, Lauren, is a special friend of mine. So glad to see you here. Let's see, Monica Allman. Monica in a moment. Monica's daughter, my fabulous producer, Tabitha, is about to give us a surprise. And so there's Mom who's in there. And Alicia, she says that she usually shops the day before, and she usually just gets the lotto tickets. That's a fast way to get Christmas shopping done, Alicia. Honey, that's a beautiful thing. And speaking of beauty, I have a special and beautiful surprise for you guys tonight. As I mentioned, we had a surprise tonight. One of my passions as a leader is to create opportunities for leadership for other women. This has been something that I have valued and treasured over a lifetime. When I have realized the opportunities that I've been given, one of the things that I look for are ways to create those same opportunities for others. And so tonight you are here for a very special episode because this evening, my fabulous producer, Tabitha, is actually going to be tonight's host. Tabitha, I met her, it's been about 18 months ago, and she is one of those bright, incredible women in ministry. And I knew that when I asked her to be the producer for the Better Together Facebook Live, that I also wanted to create an opportunity for her to do the front of the camera work that I know that God has gifted her to do. So I'm going to read Tabitha's bio to you. And tonight, our episode is titled Hope for the Next Generation. And as someone who is a part of the next generation, Tabitha is going to have a conversation with her special guest. And so this evening, if you're listening, first, stay here so that you can support one of our next bright new female leaders. I want you to be here to encourage her. We've got audience engagement. I'm going to be backstage running production. And she has created an experience for all of us so that we can find out how we can better support the next generation, as well as maybe some aha moments for you and how to connect with the millennials or the Generation X in your life. So I am so glad that you're here. Terry Bryan, thanks for joining us. Let me read Tabitha's bio to you. Tabitha Allman is an author and an aspiring speaker with a passion for encouraging and equipping women in their journey of faith and declaring truth to in a culture of lies. Despite being so shy as a child that people thought she was mute, God has been breaking Tabitha out of her shell and using her to impact men and women alike. She's the author of Steadfast, a college girl's guide to standing firm. And this is a handy book created to help young women keep their faith during the college years. Tabitha is a frequent blogger at tabithaallman.com, and she loves long drives, deep conversations, and traveling to new places. And so, friends, would you please give a warm welcome to Tabitha Allman. Tabitha's going to join me right now. Yay!
Hi, Bob.
Hello.
So it is definitely very different being on this side of the camera.
I love it. Well, and so everyone who's watching, when I refer to my fabulous producer, Tabitha, this is Tabitha who is behind the scenes. And so it did feel a little different. How did it feel when I read your introduction?
I was just thinking, so you have no idea how I've been like rehearsing this moment in my head. Like when I can't sleep at night, I'm like, okay, she's going to read my bio, then she's going to bring me on, and here's what I'm going to say. But then I feel like, you know, as the show goes on, I'll probably differ from what I planned. But I'm excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Well, I am excited that you are here this evening. And for the Hope for the Generation, I told the audience a little about what the show was going to be about. But as those who are listening right now, a lot of us, we have sons, daughters, nieces, grandchildren who are part of the next generation. What do you want us to get out of this evening's conversation?
Yeah, well, I think it can be so easy to feel disappointed with the direction that our generation seems to be going in, to feel like there's no hope for us. And I just really want people to know that even though things may not be going in the direction that we hope they would be, that there is still hope, that God is still at work, and He's still doing beautiful things in our generation. So I hope this will be a time of encouragement, but also of education. If you have questions, maybe you have a child who is a millennial or a Gen Z, and maybe you're having trouble understanding them or connecting with them, to just really get kind of an inside scoop into the Millennial and Gen Z generation. So yeah, I'm really excited for this, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, with that, so audience, I am going to switch roles with Tabitha. I'm going to drop backstage, and I'm going to turn the Better Together show over to Tabitha. Have a great show.
Thank you. Well, hi, ladies. Thank you so much for letting me take over Better Together today and for joining me. I'm really excited for this. And as I mentioned before, I'm really just wanting this to be an open and honest conversation. And so if you have any questions at all, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'm going to open them here so I can see them as you chat. But yeah, full disclosure, for my entire life, I thought I was a millennial. So I always grew up around millennials. My sisters are millennials. Most of the people I grew up around at church were millennials. And so I was convinced I was one until a few years ago, I learned that I'm like right on the line, but I'm actually a Gen Z. And so today, the guest I have on is a millennial and I'm a Gen Z. And so you're going to hear from our different perspectives. So before I introduce you to our special guest, as Barb mentioned on Better Together, we love to ask questions. And so the audience question for today is, what is one lesson that you have learned from a child or from someone younger than you? And I think this will be really helpful as we head into a conversation about generations and about what we can learn from one another. And this question is actually especially near and dear to my heart because over the past 2 weeks, I've been living with my sister, and she has 3 kids who are all under the age of 5. And so if you're a parent, you can imagine how crazy things are. But with kids, it's so funny because they'll just say the funniest things or do the strangest things. And my time with my sister has really taught me more about the Lord. Like, for example, take care of kids, you know that sometimes it feels like your main job is to keep them from accidentally killing themselves. Like they want to jump off something really high or put something small in their mouth that they might choke on. And when you take it away, they start to cry. They have a meltdown. And it's easy in these moments for me to just feel frustrated and to think like, if they only knew I was trying to help them, they would thank me. But then I kind of had to pause and think, I wonder if this is sometimes how my relationship with the Lord is. Like he takes something away or he withholds something and I throw a fit and I call him unfair or unjust. But he's thinking, if she only knew that I saw the whole picture and that I'm trying to keep her from hurting herself or causing damage to her life, she would thank me. And so a lesson that has just really been on my mind lately is just learning to trust the heart of God, that when he takes something away or withholds something, that it's actually for my good. So I would love to hear in the comments what some of the lessons that you have learned from the younger generation is. But in the meantime, I want to introduce you to our special guest. Oh, Melissa said, I would like to point out most millennials are parents now. Yes, that's true. Our special guest for today is going to be on the younger end of the millennial spectrum, but for me as a Gen Z as well, I'll have that perspective. So I hope that helps you as well. So our special guest today, I have her bio right here, and I'm gonna have her photo on the screen in a second, but her name is Anna Garas. Anna is a high school teacher, and having worked with young people with various mental and spiritual struggles, she is interested in getting her counseling qualifications. Anna enjoys spending time with friends and family, telling them funny stories, and having deep conversations, so we have that in common. She loves adventures, especially in beautiful places, and in terms of ministry, she has a passion for youth and missions, waiting for the day when there are no more unreached people groups. She also longs to see the abolition of human trafficking. So friends, join me in welcoming Anna to the show.
Hi.
Anna, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, I'm really excited to jump into this conversation. As I was researching for our talk today, I was looking up what are some of the words that people often use to describe our generations? And words came up like lazy, idle, or obsessed with social media, or some people even think that we're God's generation. And I think it would be unfair for me to say that all of these things are completely false. However, I think that these are stereotypes and they lack the necessary nuance that we need. And so today, as we talk about hope for the next generation, I really want to bring out like the ways that God is still moving and the beautiful things that he is doing. But I think it would be unfair to completely ignore the stereotypes altogether. And so let's just talk a little bit at the beginning here about where are some areas where our generations aren't doing so well. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Those are great questions. I think with every stereotype, there's good and bad. And if we see the good, we'll almost be a little bit more patient with the bad. For example, you mentioned entitled, and I hear that a lot. And considering millennials span from 40 down, why are they entitled? It's because they've inherited a world of privilege from people who worked really hard. I think of my parents as immigrants, for example, who worked really hard. So we inherited that. And yet we've fallen short because we kind of got used to the privilege we got, that we didn't have to struggle as much, and that's changing now. And I don't want to paint broad strokes, but our generation is also accused of being like overly passionate, but that's not necessarily a bad thing either, because it makes people advocate for what matters. And that self-obsessed, selfie generation also has driven people to look outside of themselves, because looking inside, it doesn't satisfy. And so they've wanted to go out and care about now things that matter, like human trafficking, like global issues. And that's an exciting thing for people to get a part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so despite all of the areas where maybe we're not doing so well, there is still hope. And so what are some examples of things that you've seen in our generations that have made you see like, or made you think like God is still moving powerfully, God is still doing beautiful things?
Oh, so I think of three right off the top of my head. I think like speaking for myself, when that bubble was shattered of our first world comfort, that can lead us to despair. And a lot of people left the church because of it. But in the last few days, I have seen people return to the lament songs and to a right understanding of suffering. We are now aware that, you know what, we can cry out to God and he will answer. And that's it, as painful as that is a good thing, because it's driving us to him as opposed to not. I've also seen I worked with youth for many years, and they are passionate about what he is passionate about, the marginalized. A lot of them do work with homeless people, for example. As you said when you read my bio about human trafficking, when I was first introduced to that less than a decade ago, it was not talked about. I was introduced to it to a university lecture. I remember weeping when I heard about it, but now there are so many Christian organizations that are mobilizing to fight this evil, but also hand in hand with the gospel. So that's exciting that people are taking the gospel and practical Christianity and things that are meaningful to millennials, whether they're Christian or not, and uniting them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another thing that people often say is that we lack resilience. And I could definitely see where that comes from in terms of you saying like, you know, we got a lot of our life handed to us. But I really think that this whole pandemic and what's been happening with COVID has really tested us. I know it has for me, just learning how to have a little more resilience, to be a little stronger in the face of affliction. And so what are some lessons that you think our generation can really teach those generations?
That's an interesting question to ask a teacher. You know, I keep thinking, and I think we've talked about this, you and I together, but the idea that there's nothing new under the sun, and that I think I forget sometimes when I see my students, I'm like, how do they not know this? And I forget that, I had to learn that one time too. So a sense of awe, a sense of wonder that we're experiencing things for the first time, just as they did, and we can mutually benefit each other. We can work together. I think, as you said about, you put it in a nice way. Most people say, millennials are non-committal, but I see that as a flexibility. Like the world is rapidly changing and they're changing with it, and not usually with fear. Maybe there's some anxiety in there. Whereas perhaps the parents' generation isn't that way. I'd love to hear people's comments on that. But I think we desperately need to see that we are all going through life, the same world, and we all need prayer and scripture, and we need each other. I can learn so much from the older, and I learn from my students all the time. I hear some of the stuff they say, and I'm like, wow, that was really deep for a 15-year-old or whatever.
Yeah, we actually have a comment here from Melinda. She said, I appreciate how tech savvy and quick-witted our millennials and Gen X's can be. I am challenged to see my world and reactions to it in a new way, thanks to these age groups. Melinda, thank you for sharing that. I think technology often gets a bad rap, and for good reason. There are so many negative ways that technology can be used. But as Anna mentioned about how passionate our generations are, I've really seen them take that passion and really be a light on social media, and to really do beautiful things with it. And so, Anna, for those who are watching, who are maybe the parents of Gen Zs or the younger millennials, and maybe are just feeling like they're having issues connecting what is some advice or encouragement that you can give them of how to really connect with their kids?
I was literally in a staff meeting today and we were talking about this. Authentic vulnerability from older people is what our young people need. It's what I needed when I was a teenager and even now as an adult. I think everybody needs to see that the older generation is also human. I think, especially in my growing up, people would hide their struggles, they would not talk about them. And then that contributed to the bubble bursting, that we bought into the Western lie almost about living our best life now. And I think we need to be open and honest that this life is, yes, it's promised to have joy, but through many tribulations, we enter the kingdom of heaven. But we can, as I think Romans 12, verse 12, I sent it to you today, our verse of the day, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. And so I think we can be a light to the younger generation as the older one is to us and so forth, by being real and authentic about our pain, about our hope. We have a common hope, right? That he who began a good work in millennials, in Gen Zs, in baby boomers, and everything in between, he who began a good work will complete it. And he is doing something amazing even in this pandemic.
Yes. Yeah. Audience, we have a question for you, and it is, I thought it was up there for a second. What are some practical ways that you can pour into the next generation? So it's easy to say like, oh, well, we don't love the direction that the next generation is going in, but what are some ways that you can pour into and support the next generation? And Anna, as you were talking about us being a light, just this past weekend, I went to a conference. And it's a new conference. It was kind of a COVID initiative, but it was called the Z Conference. And it was put on all by Generation Z for Generation Z. And it was just so encouraging. And the timing was so great being right before this interview. But I was like, wow, if anyone doubted that God was still moving in our generation, like just watching what was going on at that conference would be such an encouragement to them, because they had over 400 young people, ages 15 to 23, 37 different countries, and just people learning what it means to resist temptation, how to walk in integrity, the importance of the Word of God, and people literally crying out for revival and asking that this would be the generation where we return to the Lord and return to the importance of the Word. And so God is doing so many beautiful things, and really that's just what I want those who are watching to know, that God is still moving. He is not bound. He's not restricted. He is still at work. And Melinda is up here again as to answer the question about how they can pour into the next generation. And she said, first, listen. We need to seek to understand before we are quick to judge. That's really good, Melinda. Thank you so much for engaging with us. So Anna, just to give us a little more advice on this, how can people, especially parents, really spur on their children to live as lights? Now, I know you touched on this briefly, but what are some other ways that parents can really help out their children?
I know I touched on it, but I'm going to start with that again, prayer, because we are living in an increasingly hostile anti-Christian environment. And so your children, your grandchildren need prayers now more than ever, because it will be more and more costly. But that's not a bad thing. As you alluded to, when it is dark, our light shines bright, right? Yeah. And maybe even pray for yourselves, because I see this in my parents and older people as well. They are afraid for what it might cost their children to follow Jesus. And so maybe we need to pray, Lord, help me accept the risks that come with it for my students, for my children, for the young generation. So definitely prayer. I think we need to be saturated in scripture so that we are not blindsided by the tribulations, by the trials and the sufferings that will come. I have seen too many students and young people walk away from the faith because they thought Jesus was Santa or genie or something. And yet, if they're anchored in scriptures, they won't be blindsided. They'll know, oh, you know what? Jesus warned me about this. And they'll have that hope that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing. And they'll also respect the generation that came before. And so that will be bridged.
Yeah, that's so important. Well, Anna, I cannot believe how quickly time is going by. It's already 54. But as we kind of draw near to the end of our conversation, I know that you are a budding novelist, is what I'll call you. I did not know that you wrote books at all until just this past week when you talked about the 2 novels that you're working on. And so tell us a little bit about your writing, about your books, and about where people can find them.
Sure. So I wrote novels when I was in high school, just because I was not the greatest student paying attention, but I always did my work. And so I've written 2 novels. One was an attempt to be at Hallmark, but it was too substancy. It wasn't cheesy enough for them. Not bashing Hallmark. That's ridiculously proud. And one was in response to the Twilight fandom. Maybe everyone here is like doesn't even know what that is, but when I was a student, that was huge, and I was the only one that didn't like it. I'm like, no, there can be a decent story without weird vampire things. So that's The Peasant's Choice, and they're both found on that link that I gave you, Tabitha. I don't know if you.
Yes, we'll put that in the comments for people.
Yeah, I love writing. This is my first time with fiction. I'm more of a nonfiction person, more of an academic writer. But
all right. Well, Anna, one more question for you before we wrap up. If a parent is worried about one of their children, maybe their child isn't going to church, maybe they've walked away from the faith, just as we close, what is one encouragement you can give them?
Can I give 3?
Yes.
Mourn that. I've had to do that, but mourning in hope that God, there's nobody too far gone from God's grace. He can bring anybody back. I have someone very dear to me that's happened to, and I found that the butting heads, which often happens with parents, I've noticed in my working with youth and students and their parents, that never really works. Like forcing them, I think giving them the space and then living out that authentic faith and praying without ceasing for their souls. You know, like that widow who knocked repeatedly until she got what she wanted. We need to storm the gates of heaven in that sense. And you know what? You will get peace about it. And I do believe that God can bring anybody back. So there is hope. So live out that light. Answer the tough questions. A lot of young people leave because they are afraid to ask their questions. I was just talking about this with my students as we were studying evolution. They're like, we don't have a place where we can ask our questions. And that's not okay. They need to be comfortable asking us. Otherwise, they'll turn to the internet and be led astray, perhaps. So yeah, answer questions, be authentic, mourn and grieve without being too into their space. And then again, entreat God who can bring any prodigal son back.
Mm-hmm. So good, Anna. And we have one more comment from Melinda. Melinda, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful comments. But Melinda wrote, as older believers, we need to live out the love of Christ. We turn more young believers or the unchurched away by the lack of showing the love of Christ, showing something that is about us, etc. Instead of meeting as Christ to meet us. Yes, that is very true. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. Well, Anna, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show. I know this was like something I kind of threw you like, can you do this with me? But thank you.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely.
Of course. Well, friends, thank you so much for joining us today for another week of Better Together. Next week, we'll have a new special guest, so keep your eyes open for that. And if you want to watch previous episodes of Better Together, you can find them at barbruce.com on the blog page. So, friends, thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye.